Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event. Let's get ready to rumble!
It's Wingin' It Wednesday, driven by Service Chevrolet Cadillac.
7-11 now at News Talk 96.5 KPEL.
Everybody's dancing in here.
I have to believe the chair trade in this building is more violent than the drug trade in Mexico.
Seriously, if we could give you a slice of what goes on in here, we have to go and find our chairs. But you know what? Then they got the genius on high, large cranium. I like to call him large cranium man. He's like, you know what? Just label that stuff.
Yeah, so it's.
So at least, we have the original ones that go in our room. And I got to say, when you have arthritis, it makes a difference which chair you sit in. And I'm so short.
I know.
So I'm like, where are my feet? And some of those chairs, Brandon loves those chairs right there, him and Shannon both. And that's cool because they're giants. They are like big giants. And I am like a little tiny person. So big giants can sit in the chairs
every day.
Yes. But Winging It Wednesday.
Rob made that very offensive statement that's more vibrant than the drug trade in Mexico. You know, why didn't he just say the drug trade in this building?
We don't talk about that one. All right, so Warren Cottle and Carol Ross are here.
Warren.
And we are now a few days into our fifth special session on the budget since 2016. When I read that, I thought it was a typo, and I read it out to Bernie, and I said, listen what the Advocate wrote. The fifth
I'm like, no,
session
remember?
since 2016,
I was like,
and
this
she said...
one and this one. She's like, yeah.
I think that's right. So, Carol, we'll start with you. What's getting done? Is it enough? And
you're
should we
asking
listen?
me? That is way above what I can figure out with these guys.
Should we listen to those who say, oil prices are coming back up, we're going to be all right?
No, we should not. This is the exact time that we need to take some serious measures to rein in the spending, to get real. Look at the increase in spending just in the last 2 years. What, $5 billion more, $3 billion more, $2 million? I mean, it's an insane number. It's way above the quote-unquote fiscal cliff, which I would tell you is not as steep as they want you to believe, because this governor has never met a tax he didn't like. He's already passed $2 billion in taxes and fees and everything else, and still we have nothing to show for it. So my point is this: they have to make some really serious, before they come to us for any more money, I think they need to show us that they're going to make some serious changes to the way we do business. We cannot keep this up. Look, we have had 3 regular sessions, 2 in even-numbered year. Well, this one will be the second one in an even-numbered year, right? Mm-hmm. And those are 60 days out of 85 days. You know what that cost us? About $60,000 a day. Same thing, and we did this analysis yesterday on my show, The Ross Report, which is heard from 2 to 4 on KPEL.
Love when she gets that in segment 1.
Loving it.
But anyway, then there's the odd-numbered session, which is 45 days out of 60, at about 60,000 per day. So, I mean, you add up the numbers, and then you have, this is our 5th special. I was wrong last week. I thought it was the 6th. I mean, it's hard to keep track.
It is.
This is the 5th. Special session, and same thing. I mean, those are shorter, but like this one is going to be supposedly 17 days, but they're trying to shorten it. So I just did an average of 15 days. That cost you about $4.5 million per session. No, $900K per session, about $4.5 million for the number of special sessions that we have had so far. And he's only 2.5 years into his term.
Yes. All right. Warren, your thoughts? Are we going in the right direction here?
Well, we're going in a direction.
We're going in some direction.
I don't know if we're actually going or if we're just standing still.
Yeah.
But, look, this thing is just so out of kilter. Can't we be adults at some point? I mean, we're waiting on the Republicans to make their proposal. Well, hell, they made one. They made 40 of them. And what happened? You shot them all down.
That's right.
And whatever they came up with, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. We don't want it. You got to come up with another one. And unless they come up with what the dictator says you're going to have, then don't come up with anything. So then if they don't come up with something that you want, then, they're not doing their job. Well, by God, it's a two-way street. We got the 3 branches of government. The legislative branch is their own branch, separated from the executive branch, with the exception of Louisiana. And Louisiana is supposed to be separated, but it never has been because the governor has just basically, for the lack of a better term, has just run roughshod over the legislature and every other process. We just go out there and just decide what they're going to do, and then they just go in there and rubber stamp it. It used to be that way in Tennessee where the Democratic Party ran the state and all the bloodletting in politics took place in the Democratic primary. If you didn't back the winning candidate, the right candidate, then you lost your state job. Or if you didn't lose it, what they would do, they'd transfer you from one side of the state to the other. And on and on. And the governor, when they campaigned, they'd go around, I'm going to pave this road, we're going to build a bridge over here, we're going to build 2 schools here, we're going to look after this. And then when the legislature met, the governor came in and said, okay, pass this, and just threw it out. And they said, okay, pass it. If you wanted to find a member of the legislature, you went to Printer's Alley on in Nashville, where the bars and the strip joints and all that stuff were. And it's kind of the same way here in Louisiana, where the governor has been very powerful over the years, where they went in there. They appointed the Speaker of the House. They appointed the President of the Senate. Who the hell ever heard of such stuff as that? Yeah. I like the old film clip there where Earl Long got up and addressed the legislature when he wasn't supposed to. Of course, he was good and drunk. And he had a bottle of, I think it was grape juice and bourbon.
Oh my gosh!
And they said, "Well, you're not even allowed to." He said, "Just pass a law and I'll sign it." And
well, the indication is when John Alario says, "Well, I don't know if we're really going to get any long-term fixes." Yeah. Take it to the bank.
The Acadiana's own Taylor Barra, speaker, has spoken to some groups here in our area, and he seems to be really confident that long-term fixes will be.
My Rotary Club. Spoke to my Rotary Club. He is very positive, and he's. I think Taylor is such a gentleman. I just hope he can hang it together. He did a great job last year, even though 10 of their own of the fiscal hawks just kind of abandoned them at the last minute. But this time, I think the hue and cry is out there, and the state really the oil and gas industry still hurting very much, and they can they're all looking at that offshore lease sale. Prices are slowly climbing back up, and they're looking at the offshore lease sale. But this is the exact time when some substantive changes should be made. Exact time.
I want to ask you guys about, you want to wrap this one up?
I was going to say that the long-term fixes, I do believe that they're going to work towards that because I think you've got people like Taylor Brower and Lance Harris and some of them is that they realize
almost our entire Acadiana delegation is really hung tough.
They finally realize the fact that we're in a real pit, and something has got to be done. You can't just keep kicking the can down the road and blaming it on everybody else.
They're having special sessions over and over again and getting nothing really substantive done.
Not to mention, it takes them away from their regular jobs.
Well,
most of them have regular jobs and go there.
Their families, the whole bit.
Okay, so last week we had in our news a legislative auditors report that shows the overpayment by state agencies and local municipalities, as well as bad bookkeeping problems, account for more than $622,000. Wait, no, not thousand, million. Million. I actually wrote it wrong. $622 million of the shortfall last year. Is there a way that we can get everyone on board? Is there like an economics 101, bookkeeping, BSAT 101 that we could bring everyone to get everyone on? Would that ever happen, Warren? How do we stop this?
Well, I would say, first of all, to go to QuickBooks. Maybe that would help. The real thing I think that they really need to look strongly at, and that's that, what do they call it, the open checkbook or whatever, that Louisiana's calling it,
it made it out of committee.
Louisiana checkbook or something.
Didn't it?
I think that's the only thing you're going to do is you're going to have some complete transparency. And I go back and say that where's the money going? Everybody needs to know where the money is going. Everybody has a right to know where the money is going. Of course, now you're really fighting a tornado when you start arguing that point. But isn't that the way it should be? Is that everybody
a voice
should be
crying in the wilderness.
Everybody should be accountable. And I go back to what I think it was. I've heard this, given to several different people, but it was Everett Dirksen was the first one I heard say that billion here, billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. A little graft here, a little corruption there. Who cares? Look after you. We'll look after you. Pretty soon it collapses under its own weight.
Yeah, because everybody thinks it's okay. Louisiana House Appropriations Committee did pass the Louisiana checkbook, and so it could be on the House floor. Today's Wednesday. It could be either today or tomorrow, because usually
I'm pretty sure it'll pass the House.
I think it will. You know, one of the things that Commissioner Jay Darden said, well, one of the things Jay Darden said was, well, there is going to be a big fiscal note here.
Oh, yeah, it's going to cost us a lot of money.
And we're already doing some parts of it. Well, then we should have part of that paid.
Well,
then.
Jindal put in LA track, but it's never really worked fully the way it should.
And
I can guarantee you that some of those very clever bureaucrats in the state of Louisiana will make sure that checkbook doesn't work that well either.
I was going to say.
Here we have a legislative auditor who's finding all this waste, fraud, and abuse. And really and truly, I mean, a lot of it really is just stupidity and not paying attention, to the numbers.
Or just continuing to pay something without checking it.
Exactly. And if you read some of the things, it's like, well, they're paying for things that's not within the scope of their contract or what they're supposed to be doing.
And guess what? The people they're paying, they're not going to stand up and say, Uncle.
Do you remember about 10 years ago when there was a story, and I believe it was the Associated Press that first had the story, and it talked about the state's Medicaid system and some of the problems with overbilling because what would end up happening by some companies who were not legitimate and terrible people. One woman, they said, had 99 CAT scans within the frame of a 2 or 3 year period, for example. Yeah. And nobody stood up and said, that's so wrong.
Our Medicare, our medical, the whole way we deliver health care in this state has had serious problems in the past. We've gotten overbilled. We've overbilled the federal government. Because we had DISPRO, because we have an excessive number of poor people in the state. So they'd call it DISPRO. We get a disproportionate share of money, and then they'd end up coming back after us. And our senators would have to go in and negotiate with Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services because we overbilled, and we'd end up owing, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars, but they'd always negotiate it down. This has been a problem. DHS, our Department of Health Services in this state, I mean, you look at where the money is going, and with this Medicaid expansion, it's even worse. This is going to be the host that devours the parasite that devours the host. That's exactly what's happening, and that's not to say there are not people who need help. But when the governor expanded it to include able-bodied people who could work, and now they're going to have. Let's see where that work requirement goes. I think he's going to have to go along with that part of it. Yeah, he may see that as a fallback, one thing that he can compromise on. But because everybody wants people to work who can work.
And, the other crisis is not only how many people are coming into the system, but how sick we are as a state. Rob and I were talking a couple of weeks ago about information that Pennington Biomedical Research released. 50% of the state of Louisiana is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. Now, do the math on diabetes.
Oh, it's hugely expensive.
Talk about that wolf that's going to eat our budget.
Yes.
Warren, you can wrap this one up for us.
Some of this stuff, it just kind of like there's no oversight, that the bureaucrats just sit there and just go through the motions. There was a thing on television a few years ago about a couple of women that were selling some kind of little item to the Department of Defense. And whatever it was, it didn't amount to much, and it was like $40, $50 per item or something, and they were sending it in, and so the shipping on it was like $5. And so they made a mistake one time, and they put $500 for shipping cost or something like that. So they get a check back for the whole $500 plus the rest of it. So they did it again.
Yeah.
So then they found out that they didn't even look at the shipping. They just looked at the price for the part,
of the item,
and then they processed it. So then they got up to where they were charging like $4,000, $6,000, $8,000 for shipping to send the thing through the mail. And, those kind of things, they happen everywhere.
And they do. And it's really, really sad that so much of that would happen and that people would say to themselves, oh, I feel okay with doing that,
Well, we need more oversight. We definitely do. And the checkbook would help. I mean, at least it would make it easier for people to get to the facts.
Well, I'll tell you this. I poked around, and I have been for the last several weeks, around the Ohio checkbook one. The only thing, only because I know how this state works, there are a lot of line items where they say cattle management, $25,000. And it's a line item. unless you know what that's for.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? He could be my bodyguard.
Mm-hmm.
He could be taking my dogs for a walk. I mean, like, that's what I worry.
That's where private citizens and the media need to come in.
And say, well, what is
exactly.
this?
And they need to question
also
that.
Be where you can click on that and find out who it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
There should be a link to
30,000 contracts
right. There should be a link to
Absolutely.
caudal management.
All right, it's 7:25 on Wingin' It Wednesday.
A link to caudal management.
What, Bern? You look nervous.
Well, because Tommy is in the car with his children and they didn't hear the pledge.
They want to hear the pledge.
Yeah.
All right, let's cue her up.
All right.
We're back after
She's
this.
so
Good
cute.
morning, I'm Leighton Kilpatrick. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, and liberty to all. Amen. Have a good day, Acadiana.
It's Wingin' It Wednesday, driven by Service Chevrolet Cadillac.
Acadiana's morning news at 7:29, and just want to update folks that we were getting the official word from the Associated Press, and we're working on a story for our website right now, but the Reverend Billy Graham did die at the age of 99. So it said the Reverend Billy Graham, who transformed American religious life through his preaching and activism, becoming a counselor to presidents and the most widely heard Christian evangelist in history, has died. His spokesman saying Graham, who long suffered from cancer, pneumonia, and other ailments, died at his North Carolina home.
How about this? We were just watching ABC News just did a cut-in for a special report, and the title, America's Pastor.
Yep, that's right.
I don't think you could do it any better than that right during Wingin' It Wednesday. You guys have thoughts?
Only that he always struck me as true, as one of the real deal. You know, unlike some of these televangelists that just make you scratch your head and wonder.
Mm-hmm.
This guy always seemed to be the real deal, and I think I think his message was always strong, positive. You know.
Yeah, I think so. He also had a marvelous group that went with him, you know, with George Beverly Shea and Cliff Barrows and all of that. And plus, he would invite these celebrities in there like Johnny Cash and some of them to be with him. And, you know, I think that you can truthfully say that he was the real deal. Yeah. And that, you know, he did a lot of other things, too, that the Fellowship of Christian Athletes was a Billy Graham.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Samaritan's Purse that is being run by his son. They do amazing work.
Look at the work they did here after the flooding in 2016.
In 2016, they were the first ones on the scene along with President Trump.
Yeah.
But, you know, I want to say one
work.
thing. Rob was talking about during the break about how that they had his funeral pre-planned and all that stuff. And when Ronald Reagan died, there was some of them came out and said, well, Nancy Reagan just went overboard with all of this, that, and other. And then somebody else came along and said, no. That you have a protocol in there where they pre-plan those funerals going back for years, waiting for that time to come, and everything is already planned. Who's going to walk with? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? And so,
well, it's way too much to plan in a time of grief for the family.
Oh yeah.
So it's much better, especially of someone of Billy Graham's stature, who we know. I mean, I always think the one thing that struck me about him is the way he emphasized the importance of faith in America was illustrated just in his relationships with so many presidents, Democrat, Republican, in between. You know, along the way, he always had an ear. You know, they always had an ear for him, and that says a lot because we live in a very political world where I think it's easy to kind of turn a blind eye to.
It's very rare that one person can be universally respected.
Anyway, that story up at KPEL965.com. Again, Billy Graham,
He's
dead
almost
at
100.
the age of 99.
He almost made 100.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the debate is back on months after we saw the removal of speed cameras in our areas at some big intersections. The debate is back on about. Am I missing something?
It's just funny.
Am I missing something? Anyways, the debate about putting them in school zones is back, and people are talking about it. Warren, because you're the class clown, you can go first.
I actually watched the streaming of that meeting last night, and that there's a lot of things I don't understand. That the guy that was I guess he was the president of the council. Is it Knockin? Is that who the
Kevin Knockin?
Yeah, okay. You know, and he kept saying about well, if you don't want to pay the price and all that stuff, then, obey the laws. And, you break the law, you're going to pay the price. And that was always the big deal about the other company that was in here had that thing, which I think was a criminal organization. It had so many people went to prison. The president of the company on down for bribery and corruption or whatever. And the thing about it was that the state law said you could not use that technology to enforce traffic laws. Traffic laws are adjudicated in a court, right? And if you remember Tony Trammell when he was here, you never, ever heard him refer to one of those things as a ticket or referred to it as a violation of the law. He always said a notice of civil violation and, and the adjudication. And so the deal is that then somebody said that, they've got these things now that you can sit there with a radar gun and it'll get a video and you can process it and blah, blah, blah. And I'm saying, well, that, I agree with that. So if it passes the law thing, then that's fine. But why the hell you need to hire an outside company to come in here and pay them all that much money? You can probably buy those things off the shelf, deputize you a handful of people, and then you don't have to pay those exorbitant fees. Well, guess what? If you do that, then there's no potential for graft, corruption, and payback. Payola, is it? No, and we know that would never exist. It was in Louisiana.
And that CEO didn't go to jail he didn't do anything. I mean, and multiple CEOs in multiple states, indictments in multiple states.
Well, yeah, they did. Well, I guess I did. If anybody paid any attention to that woman who showed up there last night, that I thought was really, really spot on. She was from Baltimore, and she started talking about the Baltimore deal has cost that city millions of dollars, where that they gave tickets out to cars that weren't even moving and all kind of such stuff as that, and that, it's a horrible program the way it's been implemented. California did it right. They went and changed their law that said, yeah, they can do that, and you go to court. You prove yourself, and they got to prove that you were guilty, and on and on. But
then you pay the fine. You don't get mailed the fine in the mail.
Right, but then they wound up basically doing away with it because there was so many problems with it.
Yep. Wow. Carol?
Well, never let that stop our Lafayette Consolidated Council from doing something. We don't care how many problems there are. We need the money.
And that was said over and over last
I know.
night.
They were pretty clear about that. Look, as you know, I haven't had that much of a problem with the intersection cameras, but my problem always was, as Warren has just said, why do we need an outside contractor? Surely there is technology, and there are enough people in this area, retired police officers were reviewing the stuff anyway. Put them in charge of it, Let the money go to the police, et cetera. This thing about the schools, who's going to be against safety cameras in the schools? This is the camel's nose under the tent. They still have the problem of collecting because there's the underlying problem of due process, as Warren just pointed out. And they're trying to cure that problem, and I don't know if it can be cured. Specifically, unless certain things change in state law, et cetera. So they're going to do it. Whether it's legal or not, this council is going to do it.
Do we sit back and ask how many? Because, there are the signs with the flashing lights. Okay, I have to drive through a couple school zones here near the station. Are people still getting hit by cars in school zones? Like, is it that big of a problem that we need it? Okay.
I think William Terrio did point that out, that they haven't seen the last time. Then nobody can remember. They don't know. That's not to say it won't happen. We all want safety in a school zone. Yeah. But I think most people do respect school zones, and there are higher fines, like for texting or for doing anything that would distract you from driving in a school zone. Generally speaking, I'm really torn on this. I really don't mind those intersection cameras because I do think that they help. But but there's a problem with the way this thing is done. Serious underlying problem of due process. And by the way, I don't know if you've heard, but I've heard that most of the people who owe the 10 to 12 million that's already owed are lawyers who know that this is not enforceable.
They never pay.
They don't pay.
All right, now Warren, you could wrap this one up.
Yeah, the one thing I want to say about the school zones and such stuff is that years and years and years ago, kids walked to school. So that was the reason for the slow speed limits and all that stuff, because there was streams of kids walking down the sidewalk and all going to school. You don't see any of them doing that anymore, hardly.
Yeah.
And it's what one woman said, the biggest problem you've got there is people parking. The ones who are coming to drop off children and blah, 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 they're getting in the wrong lanes and all this, that, and other. That's where the problem is. So, I just think it's one of those deals where they're trying to address a problem that really doesn't exist in order to make money.
All right, so schools in Evangeline Parish this week. Speaking of schools, closed yesterday but will reopen today as investigators looked into several online threats. So the question, what is the appropriate punishment for students who make these threats or spread rumors of them online? Starting to get a window into that. We will find out from our panelists next. All right, 7:42 now at News Talk 96.5 KPEL. Our intrepid reporter, Jeff, said an accident just happened on the thruway at the light in front of Home Depot in the Northgate Mall.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You know what happens when something happens there. Major backups. Let us know.
Street.
Around there. You know what? No one reads street signs anymore, Warren. They just know it's in front of Home Depot. So
I understand.
He didn't say if it was northbound or southbound, so we'll just say,
boy.
don't go there. Anyways, Evangeline Parish schools are back open after authorities swept them yesterday and found there was nothing there. Nothing planted, no weapons found, no bombs or anything found. But these threats seem to be nothing new. We have talked to tons of system officials from our area who said it's something that maybe ramps up around a shooting, but they happen all the time. And of course, we now have to pay attention to them because of the warning signs that were missed in Florida. Carol, where do we go with this? It doesn't look like we're stopping them, but could we punish the people a little bit more publicly for making these threats?
I think they should be punished. I mean, this can cause such a disruption, and it also causes fear in the hearts of the kids. I mean, because they don't know when the next real situation is coming up, and the administrators and everybody involved. I mean, if you're willing to do that because you don't want to turn in a term paper or something like that, you know what I mean? And kids have done it for less. I say, investigate it, get your cyber sleuths out there, find out who did it, and make sure the kids know this person is being expelled and maybe put into the juvenile detention home and leave them there until they're ready to, I just have no truck with people who do this kind of thing because they really do. They do sow terror.
I was about to say, it's almost as bad as the actual
Exactly.
shooting.
I mean, you're creating terrorism. That is the whole objective, to get people scared. And for whatever sick reason, you may think it's a funny joke. It's not.
Yep. Warren?
If we're talking about how do you handle the threats as opposed to the actual shooting, I say, you got to make it tough on them. You really do. I knew this guy who was a principal of a little old country school that had been desegregated, and so they wanted to hire him, or he wanted a job in a city school. And he said, "God, I wished I had the speech that I gave to that school board when I went over there." He said, "Man, it was a good one." He said, "But I soon found out there was a big difference between a country school and a city school."
Oh, boy.
And he said as soon as he got over there, that about the second day there was somebody called in a bomb threat. And it wasn't Moon or Farm, but he said, "Bombing school." And so, Moon leaves those L's out all the time.
Skew.
And so he said, so I didn't know what to do. He said, I just let him out. Just dismiss school. And he said, well, hell, then we had a bomb threat every other day.
Yep.
And he said, the police said, no. Send them outside and make them stand there until we go through the school, whether it's rain, shine, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so then that's what they started doing. And he said that it was like 4 or 5, 6 months later, he got a call one day, and same thing, bombing the school. And I said, go to hell, and hung up the phone. Now, whether that was the proper thing to do or not, I don't know. But he said he never got another bomb threat for the next 4 years he was there or whatever. Wow. But, I mean, that those things, that is such a serious deal. And if you think you're going to go out there and pull a little joke or something, then you need to be, I think that they need to be given some labor, not just some old make-believe stuff like painting the stripes on the football field or whatever, but let's go out there and clean fence rows for about 3 months.
I like that.
Years ago, we had policies in news that were quite different than they are now.
Yep. We used to not cover bomb threats. Not cover suicides.
Absolutely.
now they become such big stories. We had one a few weeks ago. Remember a suicide on the corner of College Sloom and Ambassador?
Yes.
Guess what? People are calling us nonstop. That's something in news you never covered because there was no. There's one intended victim, and the victim is
with
dead.
social media, everything is out there.
It is.
Nothing is off the table. And I mean, some of the details may be you can protect,
so
privacy
many people,
as much as you can. But.
We would argue, and we did for years. We argued, you're just paying attention to someone. It's like missing teen reports.
Yep.
For a while, these kids who were thinking they would get a lot of attention, I'm going to go missing for a few days and see how many likes I get on social media because you don't want to feed into it. And now we don't have a choice because of the safety aspect of whether or not
they've been abducted or
I was going to say, now that you
Right.
have social media, how it is,
Right.
they don't need a news outlet for the attention.
That's right.
They
They'll
can
get it
post
from social
themselves.
media.
So if they're willing to really
And you remember there
disappear-
used to be like a 72-hour
There
before
need-
the police would take it
That's right.
seriously, but now with Amber Alert and everything, they want it out there because they know the first 24 hours are crucial,
our
to
laws
finding.
need to catch up with the technology.
I'll tell you, it kind of brings us to the point of school security, and you guys might not be surprised, or maybe surprised, but I was still in high school when 9/11 happened, and there was a teacher who knew everyone was on edge. Okay, I mean, especially the week after, you think maybe we know who did it. Are they going to come here? Whatever. There was a teacher I remember. His name was Coach Thiel, and he had what he called a bomb bag because we had so many bomb threats. Now, we've also gotten a little bit wiser because we would be evacuated to the football stadium every time. Well, so if anyone
that's,
knew
that's
that,
a great target.
then that's where
right
you put
there,
your
you
bomb.
have all those people
and
there.
So he said, "Look, I have a bomb bag. It has 2 Gatorades, of course, because it's September in Louisiana. It's still hot. 2 Gatorades, Sports Illustrated, some snacks." Because you didn't know how long we were going out there to the thing.
And he wanted to amuse himself with Sports Illustrated.
But now,
probably the swimsuit
There
issue.
you go. There you go.
So, but now let's kind of bring us to this point because now the question is, how do we secure the schools? I was listening to the Ross Report this week and heard, some of your thoughts about things we would need, and then it comes up, how do you pay for it? The question is, what do we need, and how do we pay for it? Warren, we'll start with you.
I would say that a whole lot of these things you can do rather cheaply. A lot of them. If you just put your head thinking and that, you're talking about having security cameras and metal detectors and all of that stuff. Security cameras don't cost anything anymore. Takes a little bit of time. Somebody sit there and watch them, whatever. You can probably also have a little deal where it programs you to let you know that somebody just penetrated a door or just walked onto the campus or whatever. I think the guy the other day went into the building, pulled the fire alarm, then went back outside and waited for him to come out and started shooting. Same thing happened, if I'm not mistaken, in Jonesboro, Arkansas about 15, 20 years ago, and those kind of things. So you never know what they're going to do. And, there's ways that you can prepare for it. There's what I like to say is that you got a problem to solve, and there's 3 legs to that stool. One is the motive, the other one is access, and the other one is the weapon. So right now we're all concentrated on the weapon. Well, if you get rid of one weapon, then what about all the rest of them? So what about the motive? What gives these people that motive? And there are people saying, well, it's because of the psychotic drugs they're on, it's because of this, because of that, it's because of video games. Well, tell me what kind of video games did John Dillinger on, Billy the Kid, and those people? What kind of video games did Adolf Hitler on? Joseph Stalin, they were real mass murderers, killed millions of people. And then we talk about the culture of death that we have in this country. And that's been said over and over and over and over again, the violent video games. It's not just the violent video games. My God, you go on YouTube and you can watch these clips after clips after clips of those helicopter gunships blowing up people in Afghanistan and Iraq. And people will sit there and watch that stuff and talk about, oh man, did you see that? If you watch that, said you can hear that pilot breathing in there,
Yep.
and blah blah blah. And then they watch, all right, go ahead, hit that one again. You watch the legs fly off of this guy. Those are people that are actually getting killed, and it's not a video game. And that the whole society has gotten to the point to where we're intrigued by that. Let's watch that again. A lot of them are. I'm not, and that. So it's a. When you solve that issue, you might as well say you found a cure for cancer. Yeah. So in the meantime, you got to start attacking all of these different segments that lead up to that final event.
Carol? security.
And really, it's not just the weapons. I mean, that's what they love to talk about, and I think it's really shameful the way some politicians are exploiting the feelings of these kids, because these kids are not. They're emotional right now, and they have a reason to be, a good reason to be. But that is not the way good laws are made. In fact, a lot of bad laws are made as a result of emotional situations such as this. I've gone online. I've done a lot of research about this. The one thing that I thought was really interesting was a sheriff in Argyle. He's in, I think it's Denton, Texas. It's the Argyle Independent School District. And that video was really instructive. And he talked about how they hardened up the schools. They have signs out there saying there are armed people on this campus who will protect our children. But here's what they have, and everybody goes through the vapors about, I don't want the teachers to have guns. They might get mad and shoot the kids one day, but, because the kids are getting out of trouble. But that is not at all a consideration. Here's what they have to go through. And they have to go through an extensive shooter and firearms training course, and that is administered by the state. They have to, teachers, whoever is going to be armed on campus has to have a mental health evaluation themselves. They have to receive school marshal designation by the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement. So, this is the whole process. And they have to renew their license every 2 years. So we have to make sure that they're still maintaining that proficiency and they're still in good shape, right? So we harden up the schools. Why do we have armed guards everywhere else in this country except the schools? And now the churches are beginning to do it. The churches are beginning to have, whether overtly or covertly, they're having people in their churches who are armed and who are designated to protect the congregation should anything like that break out. Why don't we have it at the schools? There are so many facets to this. One of the things that I heard, the Offsides guys, let me give them a plug, 4 to 6 on KPEL every afternoon, Shannon and Brandon we're talking to Dr. Kevin. And he said there's one overlooked component of this, and that is in a young person's brain, nutrition. Many of these kids are over-medicated, and they're not getting the right kind of food. He said we analyzed a whole bunch of kids, their diets, and they're not getting any nutrients. And you and I know that 90% of what we eat nourishes the brain. If the brain is deficient, they're not making good decisions. It goes into even to that level.
You made a really great point because, shortly after 9/11, when it wasn't so publicly announced, but word got around that there were going to be, undercover air marshals on flights. And guess what? That makes a lot of people feel safe. But you know what? The fact that they're not uniformed, you have no idea if the woman knitting is sitting in seat 5A.
Except for one time, this guy that sat next to me.
He told you?
Not in so many words.
She got it out of him. I can tell you that. She interviewed him and she got it out of him.
You can get a lot out of a man when you tell him how handsome he is. And
Bernie, you did that.
And a follow-up question, what do you want to do?
I'm scared to fly. I was scared to fly, so I was like, "Oh, look at this! How lucky is this girl?"
My gosh!
All right, let me make a real racist statement here, and somebody can correct me.
Get your finger on the button, Bernie.
Keep your finger on the button. How come there's no black shooters? And why don't these shootings occur in predominantly black schools?
Or private schools is another thing.
That's just food for thought. So that's all I got to say. Just I ask those questions.
No, those are great questions. What is the dynamic of the situation?
Yeah,
what's the psychology behind it?
Always white and almost always male.
What's the psychology and sociology?
It could be because in some of those schools in the inner city, everybody's armed. The kids are in gangs.
Are you saying that would be a deterrent?
I'm saying that would be a deterrent.
7:55.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Wingin' Wednesday.
And I know you had that sneaky little smile on your face. That's what you were getting at.
Hey, listen to the Ross Report this afternoon, 2 to 4, right here on KPEL.
Thanks,
Warren.
panelists.
Thanks, Carol.
Go Cajuns.
Have a good day.